This Sacramento Kings road trip has taken years off of my life, but it finally comes to an end with a victory for the new era Sacramento Kings in Minnesota, 116-114. Malik Monk has the keys. DeMar DeRozan is the captain of the fourth quarter. And De'Aaron Fox says farewell to Kings fans in a way that came off as a bit disingenuous. We'll discuss it all right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It is here. This is the week. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and you'll win if you score, or rather, if you win that $5 bet, you will score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app and head to FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And boy, what a six-game road trip this has been, huh? When the Sacramento Kings left the California capital to begin this six-game road trip, they had won 10 of their last 11 games. They were rolling in the Doug Christie era, right? De'Aaron Fox was still on this roster. He was the leader. He was the star going forward, and the Kings were well above 500. Well, here we are a couple of weeks later, and the Sacramento Kings are still above 500 thanks to tonight's 116-114 win over the Minnesota Timberwolves, an important win over the T-Wolves. Now both teams have split their season series. It's crazy. The T-Wolves won both games in Sacramento, which included the season opener, and defeating the Kings when De'Aaron Fox scored 60 points. But the two games in Minnesota, the Kings get the victory, including tonight's game, the first game without De'Aaron Fox since the big trade earlier this week. They're above 500. They get the win in Minnesota. Now they come home for, albeit just one game before heading out to Portland on the actual day of the trade deadline, or should I say night of the trade deadline. But still, getting home and how this team is returning home looking completely different, feeling completely different with Zach LaVine and Sidy Cissoko waiting for them here in Sacktown. I'm sure everybody on that trip is happy to get home and sleep in their own beds tonight. Kings, like I said, split the season series with the Minnesota Timberwolves. They make up a little bit of ground on the T-Wolves in the standings. Not enough to pass them or anything, but the T-Wolves had I think a 2.5 game lead in the standings coming into tonight's game. The Kings make a whole game back on that. Now, if it comes down to both teams having the same record at the end of the season, tiebreaker implications will kick in instead of the Wolves just getting the tiebreaker outright because they beat the Kings 3 out of 4 times. And look, the Kings looked way better tonight. Way better. And I expected this. Like, after there are shakeups, you just expect a different kind of energy, right? Look what happened with the Sacramento Kings after Mike Brown was fired and Doug Christie took over. Even if the Kings traded away their star player and their franchise player, I expected since that trade going down, this Kings team would have a renewed bit of energy. You add on top of that they're coming off of getting absolutely rinsed by the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm sure that added on a little bit, too, to why the Sacramento Kings looked more engaged, looked more locked in, looked into attack mode from the very beginning. They had like 25 points or something like that in just over the first 6 minutes of this game, and nobody looked more engaged, locked into, okay, it's a new era here in Sacramento. Guys got to step up. Nobody answered that call more and jumped out more than Keegan Murray. Keegan Murray, to me, jumped off the screen. I mean, he scored 17 of his 19 points in the first quarter, came out completely in attack mode, had a pair of three-pointers in that quarter, but wasn't just relying on the three-point shot, was attacking the basket, getting offensive rebounds, looking for putback opportunities, shooting and scoring off of the dribble, even taking the ball up the floor. I genuinely could not remember a time at any point over Keegan Murray's career. I'm sure it's happened at some point. I just haven't recognized it. But tonight was the first time that I clocked and made a note of, wait a minute, Keegan Murray is taking the ball up the floor. Now, is that a humongous deal? No. And did he take the ball up the floor every single time? No. But I think that was a small change, a small noticeable representation of how he has been charged with stepping up and making up for the absence of De'Aaron Fox. Look, you are losing in this trade. You are getting rid of 25 points per game, your leading scorer. But you're also getting rid of, and you've also lost someone who is taking just shy of 20 field goal attempts per game, 19.6 field goal attempts per game. That's what De'Aaron Fox was averaging this season. 20 shots is a lot of shots to go around. And of course, when Zach LaVine starts playing for this team, he's going to make up for a lot of them. Zach LaVine is averaging 16.9 attempts, so basically 17 shot attempts so far this season, or at least he did with the Chicago Bulls. Maybe that number will slightly go up. Maybe that number will slightly drop. But for tonight, with no Zach LaVine and no De'Aaron Fox, there were a lot of shots to be dispersed. And it was clear that Keegan Murray, whether he took it upon himself or he was challenged by Doug Christie or his teammates or whatever, Keegan Murray definitely seemed like he was entering this game going, we, one, are coming off of an embarrassing loss. Two, just traded away our franchise player, who, of course, Keegan Murray was very close with. And three, we just need new energy. So I'm going to take some responsibility for that on my shoulders. I'm going to be in attack mode against a very keen Minnesota Timberwolves team that is known for their defense, even though defensively they're struggling this season. I really liked Keegan Murray's aggressiveness. I really liked his shot selection. Now, we did see something that we've seen, unfortunately, a lot with Keegan over the course of his career. How many times, and I've talked about this multiple times on the Locked On Kings podcast over Keegan's career to this point. How many times have we seen Keegan have a really good first quarter and then just kind of fade into the background, right? It happened again. 17 points in the first quarter, 2 points for the remainder of the game. Now, those other 2 points that he scored was a nice two-handed dunk on the baseline. But I want to see Keegan, if he's going to be the guy in attack mode, if he's having success, spread that out through 4 quarters. Now, I'm aware teams make adjustments, right? Suddenly we saw McDaniels guarding Keegan Murray a little bit more and Rudy Gobert rotating over to cut off Keegan Murray a little bit more, right? I understand teams are going to adjust to go, okay, he's got the hot hand. We're going to make sure we're focusing on him and defending him a little bit better. But I think one of the next steps in Keegan's evolution as a capable scorer and a potential go-to scorer is, hey, when you're hot, spread it out, right? You don't have to go nuclear for all 4 quarters. You don't have to score 17 points a quarter over the course of an entire game. But don't have a monumental quarter and then fall off the face of the earth for the rest of the game. It's an issue with Keegan Murray because it keeps happening. It is also an issue, I think, with the team and with the other players who should be emphasizing getting Keegan involved more. But really, I put that on Keegan. Hey, if you took charge and had an emphasis to start the game on, you were going to set the tone offensively. Keep that tone, carry that attack mindset and that aggressiveness through the remainder of the game. But a thing with Keegan, too, is he got this ball rolling, but then kind of stepped aside as guys like Malik Monk and DeMar DeRozan really stepped up. Malik Monk has the keys now, right? Like De'Aaron Fox left and handed Malik Monk the keys, and I'm not talking about the keys to the franchise's player, but Malik Monk is the key, has the keys to this Kings offense. Malik Monk is the guy that's driving things. He is the man that makes this thing go. And I think this is like we talk about, what do the Kings have to do? What does this version of the Kings have to do in a post-De'Aaron Fox world? What does this version of the Kings have to do to surprise everybody, to shock the world, to put together a playoff run and put together a foundation that you feel you can build upon to eventually compete for a championship? I think one of the biggest realistic changes that can happen is Malik Monk taking another jump now that he is absolute number one floor general, commander, whatever you want to call him. He is the guy that facilitates for this team. He is the primary ball handler. He's the primary initiator. Malik Monk is that dude. Tonight, 26 points, 10 of 23 from the field. The field goal percentage is not that great, but he hit some big shots. 8 rebounds, 5 assists, a steal, and a block. His block, I think, was on Rudy Gobert. It was a nice block. Malik's been tallying up those blocks over the course of the season. In the fourth quarter, he actually led the Kings in scoring down the stretch with 10 points, including being 4 of 4 from the foul line. Now, I still say that DeMar DeRozan was the guy that closed this game out for the Sacramento Kings in the fourth quarter, despite scoring less than Malik Monk did in that frame. I'll get to DeMar DeRozan in the next segment. But Malik was showing, hey, look, I know my best friend in De'Aaron Fox. I know him probably better than anybody. I know how important he was to this team. I know his responsibilities for this team. This is how I can take on some of those responsibilities but make them my own. You need me to score in the fourth quarter and make up for some of that? Hey, I can do that. But I'm going to put my own flair on it. I'm going to get my buckets my way. Just like De'Aaron Fox had his spots on the floor, whether it was getting to the rim or getting to that elbow, pull-up, mid-range jumper, or whatever it was, Malik's got his spots. He's got that patented stop and turnaround midi. He's getting to the rim. He can also shoot off the dribble from three-point range. This is where we're going to see, like, I'm not saying it's all on Malik Monk, especially with Zach LaVine coming to town, but again, to me, if the Kings are going to make that surprising leap and shock the world and get themselves in a position where they have improved in a post-De'Aaron Fox world, it's going to be because Malik Monk takes another leap and takes another step. And I'm curious, too, and I asked this question of Kenny Caraway on social media from ESPN 1320, good friend of mine, good friend of the show, and I think a lot of Kings fans responded to it negatively or sarcastically because I think they thought I was asking it in a sarcastic way. I was dead serious with this question. Do we think that Zach LaVine, who's going to come in and statistically be the leading scorer on this Kings team, averaging 24 points per game, do we think Zach LaVine commands the same amount of offensive attention as De'Aaron Fox does or did? Because Malik Monk is the one that's going to feel impacted by that the most, right? Because there were stretches of tonight where Malik had the opposing team's best defender put on him. If Malik was on the floor with De'Aaron Fox, there was, unless they were switched, there was almost never a period of time where Malik was facing off and having to deal with the opposing team's best defender. Malik is going to get that a lot more. But if Zach LaVine comes in and continues to be this incredible three-level scorer, DeMar DeRozan keeps doing his thing as that ISO clutch scorer, the ability for them to take that pressure off of Malik Monk as the primary ball handler to not have to deal with the opposing team's best defender, I think that's going to be a big difference, too, for the long-term success of Malik and the long-term success of this team. I want to talk more about DeMar DeRozan. I want to talk about the cohesiveness of this half-court offense. Also want to talk about a couple of bench bullies for the Kings that might be the foundation of Sacramento's limited defensive success. Plus, De'Aaron Fox's goodbye to Sacramento that's rubbed some Kings fans the wrong way. It's all still to come here on Locked On Kings. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. What are some of your relationships' green flags? We often hear about the red flags in our relationships, whether it's a romantic relationship, a relationship with family members, friends, coworkers, whatever, that we should avoid. But what if we focused more on identifying the positive signs in our relationships, those green flags? If you're not sure what those green flags look like, therapy can help you identify them, actively practice them, and even embody that green flag energy yourself. Whether you're dating, married, building a friendship, or just working on yourself, therapy can help you form relationships that love you back. Therapy helps you develop things like healthy boundaries, that improves your communication skills, that allows you to help set clear expectations in those relationships and express your needs when you need to. Therapy provides tools for managing conflict as well in ways that strengthen your connections rather than break them down. BetterHelp makes it easy by offering online therapy with over 30,000 licensed therapists to choose from. And if you need to switch therapists at any time, you can do so at no extra cost. Discover your relationship green flags with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get the 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. You know the meme or the gif from the movie Captain Phillips starring Tom Hanks. It's the look at me, I'm the captain now. That's in a way what DeMar DeRozan is saying with the final 5 minutes of this game, or of these close games, aka clutch time, right? When DeMar DeRozan was brought in, we talked about how the Kings have this new clutch dynamic duo in him and De'Aaron Fox. And we talked about all the ways that could really benefit the Kings. And we did see that a number of times over the course of this season. But in reality, I don't think we had a large enough sample size to call it a failure or anything like that. But as we know, in the early parts of the season, the first 30 some odd games, the Kings were not nearly good enough in clutch time. Now, DeMar DeRozan is the dude in those spots with De'Aaron Fox departing, and that doesn't mean that Zach LaVine isn't going to help him, or Malik Monk isn't going to help him, or Domantas Sabonis, Keegan Murray, whoever you want to insert into this conversation. Doesn't mean that he's going to be the only guy in crunch time taking on those responsibilities. But I will say it is easier to make up for the absence of De'Aaron Fox and the departure of one of the most clutch players in the league when you have someone like DeMar DeRozan on your roster. Tonight, DeMar DeRozan was fantastic. 33 points, 14 to 25 from the field, 5 rebounds, 7 assists in the fourth quarter, 9 points, 4 of 7 from the field, 2 rebounds, 1 assist, getting to his spots when the ball was kind of slowed down or stopped by that Minnesota Timberwolves defense. He would get to that top of the key mid-range jumper, knock that down over Rudy Gobert a couple times, had a really nice drive where he turned the corner, faced the contact from, I think, McDaniels, and goes right up through and finishes with the right hand layup at the rim. Just the way we talk about Malik Monk is going to be so important to the success of the Kings going forward as like the primary facilitator and taking over those responsibilities and taking that leap with De'Aaron Fox gone. DeMar DeRozan continuing to carry on his legacy and truly establishing himself as the new clutch guy here in Sacramento. That's going to be essential to the Kings' success as well. And what I really, really liked in this game in particular, that while Debo was the man, like we just talked about with Malik Monk, Malik was a good support, right? Debo really helped put this game away in the final minutes. That was very close, right? The Kings and T-Wolves were kind of going blow for blow, punch for punch. And I will say Malik Monk in crunch time in the final couple minutes hit some really clutch free throws. But I thought Malik did a really good job providing a good amount of scoring in the first 6-7 or so minutes of the fourth quarter, right? The game's still close, and that was a lot of time where De'Aaron Fox ate as well. Again, crunch time or clutch time is 5 minutes or less remaining in the game when the game is within 5 or fewer points. That is clutch time. But there's still 7 more minutes in the fourth quarter that are important, that are essential. De'Aaron Fox was really good in those 7 minutes as well. What we saw in this game was Debo put this game away in clutch time. But Malik Monk, I thought, did a really good job supporting him by getting those big essential buckets and those important, having those important moments early on through the early stages of the fourth quarter to help establish DeMar DeRozan to go and do his thing. Overall, I thought offensively, the Kings' half-court offense looked very cohesive. It's a very small sample size. We've had like 3 or 4 games in recent memory where De'Aaron Fox hasn't played, and the Kings have won a majority, if not all, of those games. So I understand a lot of people who are eager to move on from De'Aaron Fox, how they kind of hang their hat on that. Still, 3 or 4 games is not nearly a large enough sample size to make a overall predetermined assumption or belief of who this team is now without De'Aaron. I will say this, though. I felt tonight, just watching the Kings, again, I do recognize that there was a renewed energy with everything going on, with the OKC loss, De'Aaron Fox's departure, so that played a factor into it. But I felt that half-court offense just flowed better tonight for the Kings. It looked good. You need to see it more often. You need to see it consistently throughout a game because the offense is what the Sacramento Kings are going to hang their hat on, right? Defensively, this team is not going to, as the roster stands right now, they could still make some changes to it before the deadline on Thursday. But as the roster stands right now, defensively, this team is just not going to be very good. But offensively, they have a chance to be really, really good, which is kind of par for the course for this organization over the last handful of seasons. Their half-court offense, when you have De'Aaron Fox, you talk about how good this team can be in transition. And I still expect the Kings to be good in transition, right? Especially when Zach LaVine gets here. Having Malik Monk and Zach LaVine get up and down the floor. Keegan Murray can run as well. DeMar DeRozan likes to push the ball with tempo, even if he gets a rebound and has a chance to do so. So the Kings will still try and run and get out in transition. But I felt watching the game tonight that the half-court offense just felt more cohesive, more smooth. It felt more natural for this team. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the foundation of Sacramento's half-court offense is the two-man game between Malik Monk and DeMar DeRozan. And this is something that jumps off the page, and a lot of people have pointed this out, and they're completely right. Malik Monk and DeMar DeRozan's two-man game is better and looks better than Fox and Sabonis did together at any point. It's not the same, right? It's just Malik's play style and De'Aaron Fox's play style are different enough to where you really see that difference come out with how they play off of and through Domantas Sabonis. I've said before, and I'll say again, the Kings need to rigorously go to that pick and roll, that two-man game with Domas, and have guys like LaVine and DeRozan and Keegan and Keon and everybody else play off of that and move and feed off of that. Now, you still have DeMar DeRozan that you can go to at any time, right? Oh, it's late in the shot clock. Oh, we need a bucket to stop the bleeding or whatever. All right, let's give Debo the ball and give him an isolation set on the wing or wherever he wants the ball. Let him go to work. Maybe he can draw a foul. Maybe he can hit his mid-range shot, get to the rim, whatever, right? And I do think Debo, when he's not in those spots, has done a much better job and grown significantly over the course of this season of finding ways to still contribute to Sacramento's half-court offense when it doesn't feature those isolation sets, spacing the floor more, taking those open threes or deep twos when they are available. He's done a better job with that. But you can always lean on Debo for those ISO, gotta-have-it buckets. The foundation of the Kings' half-court offense is going to be that Monk and Sabonis two-man game. Now you add in a three-level scorer like Zach LaVine, who is astronomically better three-point percentage-wise than De'Aaron Fox was this season. 44% to De'Aaron Fox's 32%. I mean, the LaVine's three-point percentage is astronomically better than everybody on the team not named Domantas Sabonis or Keon Ellis, right? So his ability to space the floor, assuming he can keep that up, and please, God, don't let Zach LaVine be the latest in the long list of players who could shoot really well, then came to Sacramento and suddenly forgot how to shoot. Every shooter comes into the Golden One Center against the Kings and shoots really well. So for God's sake, can Zach LaVine come into the Golden One Center on Wednesday night and shoot well as a member of the Kings? Please, God, basketball gods, don't do that to us again. But assuming LaVine can still hit those threes at a high clip, while also being the athletic freak that he is, the three-level scorer that he is, he can score from the mid-range, he can score off the dribble, he can attack the basket. We all know if he gets a full head of steam and gets up in the air, he can throw down some nasty jams. It's going to ignite the Golden One Center for sure. You add that into what the Sacramento Kings look like in the half-court offense, it should only benefit them. I think there is going to be a growing period and a figuring out period of, I mean, DeRozan and LaVine know each other very well. That's good. Malik Monk's going to have to learn how to get LaVine the ball in his spots. And I'm really interested to see what the LaVine and Domantas Sabonis two-man game looks like. While I don't expect them to be running pick and roll the same way that we see Monk and Sabonis run pick and roll, Zach LaVine coming off of a DHO and either pulling up for three or curling and trying to get down to the rim, I think that could work really, really well. I'm very interested to see what LaVine and Sabonis look like together in that two-man game. I mentioned bench bullies. Now, to be fair, tonight, Keon Ellis started. He started in place of De'Aaron Fox being out. So this is not exactly the bench bullies, but when LaVine plays, he's going to be in the starting lineup. The belief is he'll start at the 2, DeRozan will stay at the 3, Keegan stays at the floor 4, Keon's going to go to the bench. Malik Monk is the 1. With Keon going to the bench, Keon and Trey Lyles, I think, are going to be looked at heavily as the source of defense on this Kings team. Right? We know this team still lacks depth, needs to address that, especially with offensive help off of the bench. Right? This bench or this starting unit is going to carry a lot of responsibility offensively. You need more scoring punch off of the bench for sure that you don't have right now. But whether it's Keon Ellis coming in to guard the opposing team's best player or Trey Lyles coming in just to be an enforcer. If you can get from the two of them on a somewhat regular basis what you got from tonight, you're in really good shape. The two of them, Keon Ellis and Trey Lyles, combined for 5 steals and 4 blocks tonight. Now, maybe expecting those numbers from the two of them every single night is a bit extreme. I think Keon Ellis also had like 3 or 4 assists. Trey Lyles also had 8 rebounds. So they were doing it all in a lot of different ways. Keon Ellis, I think, scored 13 points too. So offensively, he played pretty well as a starter. But I'm really looking with that second unit. Offensively, we know as of now, as constructed, they're going to lack a little bit of that offensive punch off the bench. But defensively, that's where those guys can bring it every single game. I know the Kings are not going to be a good defensive team. But Keon, Trey, Keegan, those 3 hopefully can make enough defensive plays to ultimately help the Sacramento Kings win ball games. Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on who will win the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what is happening on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for you to continue to have more fun during the Super Bowl, man, that's the icing on the cake. If you ask me, download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Again, you bet just $5. You win that first bet. Put it on the easiest bet that you can find, and you will win $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. So like I've talked about, there's still work to be done for the Kings, right? They still have 3 or so, a little less than 3 days remaining until the trade deadline on Thursday. I expect the Kings to continue to be aggressive, to continue to search, to find not another big name to the level of a Zach LaVine or anything like that to add to this roster, but to find something, whether it's a John Collins type piece, igniting those trade talks again. I'm pretty sure Cam Johnson is pretty much dead or off the table at this point from the Brooklyn Nets, but you never know. Things can change. A name that I'm telling you should keep an eye on, Jonas Valanciunas. Jonas Valanciunas is someone that I know the Sacramento Kings have had interest in to provide a little bit of backup center depth behind Domantas Sabonis, and I do believe there's a feeling that there are periods of time where the Kings can have success with Sabonis and Valanciunas on the floor together. It was reported a while ago that Valanciunas' price may only be matching salary and somewhere along the lines of a couple of second-round picks. Well, the Kings got 6 picks in this De'Aaron Fox trade. 3 of them technically are for sure second-rounders, but the Charlotte top 14 protected pick this year is basically 2 more second-rounders on top of that. You can use those picks to get the Washington Wizards to say goodbye to the big man. I would not be surprised if that picks up some steam. So just keep an eye and an ear out for that. But the Kings, of course, still need forward depth. They're still undersized at the forward position. And now they're light at backup point guard, right? It's Malik Monk and it's Devin Carter. And while I'm not giving up on the kid by any means, because Devin is behind the 8 ball with all the injuries that he's dealt with, it's pretty clear to see when watching Devin play that I'm not going to say he's not ready yet, but he might not be ready to make the impact that the Sacramento Kings require on those minutes where Malik Monk is off the floor. Because Malik Monk can't play all 48 minutes, right? We know this. We saw when Monk and Fox were here together, and in minutes where Monk was off the floor, Fox was typically on to keep running this offense, right? And we had a moment in this game where Malik Monk was fouled hard, had the wind knocked out of him, it looked like, by Rudy Gobert, and he spent some time on the ground. He ended up being fine, but you have those scary moments and you think, like, if there is an injury this team cannot afford, it's Malik Monk. I mean, Domantas Sabonis is up there too, for sure. But Malik is the only real primary facilitator and ball handler that the Sacramento Kings have at this point. Zach LaVine will add a little bit to that, but not to the level of Malik Monk. So the Kings, if they can address that backup point guard depth, they should be keeping an eye out to do that. De'Aaron Fox released a goodbye message or statement on social media today. It was noticeable that he did not say goodbye or thank the Kings organization in any kind of way, but of course, he did thank the fans. But what I'm about to read for you, a portion of this goodbye, has rubbed fans the wrong way. He said, quote, "To the fans, y'all deserve the best. I wanted to end my career here and never expected it would end this way, but I'll always be grateful for your support." I understand if you as a fan feel that that line is disingenuous. De'Aaron he didn't expect it to win this way, end this way. He wanted things to work out here in Sacramento when he had his agent, Rich Paul, all but force him out the door, and he picked only one team that he wanted to go to. So the Sacramento Kings were kind of hamstrung on the deal that they could have made, blah, 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 blah. I get it. I understand. When I read that initially, while I didn't think it was disingenuous or react natively to it, I went, maybe not exactly what I would have said there, given the circumstances of everything that happened. I do believe that Fox was sincere in the sense that I believe there was a time as early as, definitely this season, as early as a month ago, that he did think that things were going to work out here ultimately and that he was going to remain a Sacramento King for hopefully the remainder of his career, but maybe at least for the next 4 or 5 years with a contract extension. But I think a mixture of Rich Paul's ambition, because it makes a whole lot of sense for Rich to get another one of his clutch guys to San Antonio to pair with Victor Wembanyama and put him in the spotlight in that way. Makes a ton of sense for Rich to want to do that. So that played a factor. Plus the state of this organization, right? From the firing of Mike Brown to not really addressing some of their issues over the last 2 years, to not exactly trending in the most positive of directions. Like, all this played a factor in De'Aaron Fox leaving. It does not mean that he didn't screw the organization over or he didn't kick over a few pots and pans or flower pots or whatever on the way out the door. Like, De'Aaron's certainly not blameless in any of this. So that's where I understand that if you as a fan read that and heard those comments and reacted in a way that was like, I don't believe you. I don't blame you necessarily for feeling like that way. All I can tell you can choose to believe me or not. All I can tell you is I know for a fact De'Aaron Fox loved this city. His family loved this city. I think for a long time, De'Aaron was genuine in his belief that he would be here his entire career. But I think it was pretty clear, certainly over the last couple of weeks, but really over the last month or so, that De'Aaron's been checked out, and what needed to happen, I guess, happened. So here we are. Monte McNair also released a statement as the Kings initially officially announced that the trade was finalized. He said a couple of things. One of the things that McNair said was, quote, "De'Aaron has played a pivotal role with our franchise, and we are deeply grateful for everything he did to support the organization on and off the court." Monty also said of Zach LaVine, "As we look to the future, I am excited to welcome Zach to Sacramento. He is a gifted scorer, and his athleticism will make an impact on both ends of the floor." I posted those quotes on social media today, and a lot of people reacted to them in a way that I guess the Kings front office has kind of earned because of not doing a press conference after the Mike Brown firing. But a lot of people thought like these comments would happen in a press conference, wouldn't happen, right? To be fair to Monty, we haven't been told of any kind of press conferences officially happening or not. But typically around this time of year, you don't get a press conference until after the trade deadline is done. Even if we're expecting to see Zach LaVine and the new Kings play before the trade deadline wraps up, it's customary typically for you to get through the trade deadline and then have a press conference after that. So we're talking either a press conference on Thursday, although I'm expecting a press conference to be on like Friday or Saturday or something like that. If we get through this trade deadline and the Kings still don't do a press conference with Monte McNair, don't worry. I and many other media members will have plenty of things to say, but I don't think the Kings will make that mistake twice. I'm excited about Wednesday night. Kings and Magic here inside of the Golden One Center on the eve of the trade deadline. Zach LaVine is reportedly set to make his debut for the Kings. I know I was not the biggest fan of the trade. There's still elements of the trade that I am not a fan of. But I am a fan of Zach LaVine. And I am very curious and intrigued to see what this will look like. So we'll get our first glimpse inside the Golden One Center on Wednesday night. Want to hear from you, your thoughts on this game, your thoughts on what you're expecting or what you're looking forward to seeing from LaVine and the Kings on Wednesday inside the Golden One Center. Of course, if you are going to that game, come by Section 105, top of Section 105. It's the media area. That's where I sit. Would love to have you come by, say hi. Would love to chat with you a little bit. It's just going to be nice to have Kings basketball back in Sacramento. Again, it feels like it's been a month or longer since we've had Kings basketball to watch here in Sacktown. So looking forward to that. Can't wait to have you join me for the post-game podcast after that game. But I will have another podcast for you before that. I'm going to be joined by a buddy of mine from Chicago, Big Dave, from Bowl on Bulls and the CHGO Bulls podcast. He will join me tomorrow. He's a friend of the show, been on the show a couple of times. We'll talk about the Kings becoming essentially the Sacramento Bulls and DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine teaming up again, but this time in Kings purple. We'll talk about that and more coming up on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Kings. So I hope to see you there. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.